Though he lost re-election last year, former President Donald Trump is still the Republican Party's standard bearer. This weekend, he held a rally in Georgia where he is endorsing three candidates in primary elections. It's a change from other recent former presidents who usually do not draw public divides within their own party. So how is Mr. Trump's unique approach working? Republican strategist and former RNC communications director Doug Heye is here to break it all down for us. Doug, welcome. Good to see you again. So at the Georgia rally over the weekend, former President Trump falsely claimed that the Arizona ballot audit found that he won Maricopa County. I mean, simple question, Doug, do you think that's a winning strategy for Republicans to continue to adhere and show allegiance to demonstrably false claims?
The short answer is no, and there are multiple reasons for that. One, we could talk about the more moral and philosophical issues around that, but also just brass politics of it. It's interesting to me that the president was in Georgia this time, because the last time he gave a rally in Georgia, he was lukewarm at best about two Georgia Senate candidates. And ultimately, I would argue, I think a lot of Republicans would argue, that Donald Trump cost Republicans the United States Senate with those two runoff races that Republicans should have won last time. And that's the margin in the Senate right now. And what we saw this weekend, where Donald Trump said about the current Republican governor of Georgia that maybe Republicans or maybe the state of Georgia would be better off with Stacey Abrams, it's not really something you'd expect a Republican to say, and for obvious reasons. And ultimately, this is the fear that a lot of Republicans have with Donald Trump is, they're all hustling to pick up points with him, but Donald Trump doesn't give points. He only takes them away one at a time. And Georgia's maybe the best example of that.
Well, the former president continues to express sympathy for supporters who participated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol while attacking law enforcement officers who tried to protect the Capitol. We know that inconsistencies have not been something that have bothered the former president in the past, but does it complicate at all the political sort of landscape for a former president who ran on the concept of law and order?
Sure, it complicates it on law and order. It also complicates it on the issue of where a lot of Republicans would campaign on Blue Lives Matter or being very supportive of the police. It complicates that as certain police officer unions or just individual police officers on their own may look at this and turn away from other Republicans that might be either mimicking the rhetoric of the president or just because of the president's rhetoric.
Well, let's talk about Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Her re-election is pitting two Republican groups headed by two former presidents against each other. What do you see as the stakes riding on her race?
Yeah, it's a big direction forward for what ultimately the Republican Party may turn out to be, not just short term, but even more so long term. A lot of Republicans are looking not just at the Cheney race, but also, say, all the Senate races where you have a lot of Senate Republicans who are retiring. Richard Burr in North Carolina, Rob Portman in Ohio, Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, for instance, that the Republican replacement there may be more Trumpy than what they're replacing. And certainly if Liz Cheney were to lose as well, that could also seal a fate for what the long-term direction of the party would be. Her victory would also be a real boon for those who want to move forward and put Donald Trump in the rearview mirror, which is a lot more Republicans than would be willing to admit publicly.
I do want to follow up a bit, Doug, because I wonder what you think about former President George W. Bush, really jumping in with both feet with respect to Congresswoman Cheney's race, because as you well know, he has been very reluctant in the past and did not during the time of President Trump's time in office criticize former President Trump. But it is clear now that the gloves appear to be coming off.
Well, I don't think we know yet. Personally, I've been disappointed that we haven't heard more in the past from former President Bush. I think he'd been an important voice over the past 4 or 5 years. But there's clearly a long-term relationship with Liz Cheney, with her family, as everybody knows. That's probably one of the catalysts of it. We'll see if President Bush decides to go into other races of those people who voted to impeach or not support challenging the election results. And if he does so, he can help chart that course forward for the Republican Party. What we don't know is how veiled he's going to be in his rhetoric moving forward, or whether he's going to directly try and take on the president.
All right, to be continued. On Monday, meantime, the National Republican Congressional Campaign Committee launched its first midterm-focused ads targeting some 17 Democrats. Now, the ads attempt to tie those members to President Biden. How does what happens this week potentially shape the midterms?
Well, it could certainly lessen the impact that the ads have, but the NRCC is making a real bet here that Joe Biden's approval ratings are at the lowest that we've ever seen. Certainly, he started with very good approval numbers, and that whatever happens this week, while it might strengthen Biden a little bit, ultimately won't result in his rebounding to having numbers at 55 or 57%. And part of that is because also, if this week doesn't go well for Joe Biden, and part of this is that not most voters don't really know what raising the debt ceiling means or what the implications for it are. But if Biden is able to thread the needle and have the trifecta of his two appropriations bills or his two infrastructure bills and raising the debt ceiling, well, that will be a big boon for Biden. It won't get him to a 55% margin. And if he's unable to do so, then that may be a 1-2 punch for Biden, following up on really the disaster that we saw in the handling of Afghanistan, and put the presidency not just in peril for a legislative agenda, but also a political peril because of the midterms, which should favor Republicans going into next year.
And just very quickly, Doug, I mean, where do you think immigration factors into all of this? Because, of course, we saw that situation in Del Rio, Texas, develop very quickly here. We saw not just Republicans, but, of course, Democrats as well, criticizing sharply the Biden administration's handling of what has taken place, something that we hadn't seen early on in the Biden administration. But now, clearly, there are Democrats who are not afraid to speak up about the way that they think the Biden administration has mishandled that situation. Is that a potential vulnerability here in the midterms at all for Democrats?
Without question, because the complaints are coming from two different directions. And what we could see from Democrats, it will potentially really lessen the impact on the Hispanic base where Democrats have done very well recently. And Democrats are now having problems with Hispanic men. And Republicans are quite happy to talk about immigration. They'll do it in a very different way than Democrats, but they've always felt that that's an issue that's in their corner when they feel that they're campaigning strong on immigration.
All right, Doug Heye. Doug, always great to see you. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Thank you.